They're hybrids. Now, that's not to be used negatively. That's the truth of the human walk. And if you are not ready to handle that, many people in secret societies know this information, but they only speak of it in attic chambers around the world. And so because they've hidden this history from the people keep looking at these as an original people. They're not original. They are hybrids. And the two particular heterogeneous species is the Pongidae and the humanoid. And that makes what you know as the Albion or the Caucasian tag from the experiments coming from Patagonia that is now called Argentina. And so when you do the research and you start looking at the problems that a man named Hitler had with trying to eliminate some of those problems that were inculcated in Germany that also was breaking them, etc., you're going to find that some of the history that was told to you about Hitler is incorrect. Now, you're getting in an uncomfortable area with a lot of people. And so some of these things are never talked about openly because you will be sanctioned. Because one of the first things that the Circle Church Circle Church and Curia members must do is pledge all economic operations of the United States Corporation Company of the Jesuit order to what they call Yisrael. Now tell me that's not a fact. So when you start learning who's really been running the banks, who's been running the schools, who runs the United States, who runs the judicial system and the POW camps, everybody wants to get persimmon mouth. It's the hybrid Europeans. Sometimes referred to as Khazarian, sometimes referred to as the Cabal, sometimes referred to as the Satanists, etc. But that's what's been happening to you and the world to this very day. And it's important for you to comprehend that so that you can start healing the Moorish nation. Because without the knowledge of how you got to this position, you will be fighting the wrong fight. That's the fact, y'all.
Okay. So DD, it says there are groups claiming to have AB bloodline of Jesus/Abraham Lincoln's Armenian lineage, saying they want sovereignty restored. However, without mention of Moors. I've been saying that. What does that mean for us?
Now,
I've been asking
remember
you that.
what we said to people for years. I said, remember I said this for years before this stuff came out with this cover up with this biological warfare, which they admit to right here, right? And I said, some people mistake when I say that Trump is a sign. I said, but keep this in mind, they're battling over our estate. Yeshua, because it ain't no Jesus. Jesus is a password. And that's why symbolically for the knowledge, Jesus is used connotatively as meaning justice when the knowledge comes out. Or when the truth comes out, it will make the people free. So what you call Jesus is Yeshua ben Yosef. And so they were Canaanite Moabite blood. This is, again, why they'll give you signals even in all your secret societies. They'll say, who was Ruth the Moabitess? And they'll say, Ruth the Moabitess was Jesus' great-great-grandmother. So who is the Moabites? Moabites are what? A branch of the old Canaanites from the land of Canaan, which is now called Israel. Isn't that interesting? Right next to Hikupta, that you know is Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Oh, so the real Sabians are Moors, aren't they? So it seems like somebody who's been claiming to be JEW are not who they claim to be. And they've been pretending to be you and killing you off. So we need to heal the nation, don't we? Without a knowledge of what happened to you, you will be distracted by people who are placed among you to distract you into not things that are not, that's not that they're not important, but they're not where your cure is. I just remind you that, so you need discernment. And I'm not saying don't do certain things. I say do everything that you do with knowledge and discernment. And what we try to do here at the House of Reawakening Minds is share with you a lot of knowledge that we know others have, but they stay away from, because it will kill their little clubs and it will take their hands out your pockets. And it will get you to stop sacrificing the next generation with a bunch of beliefs and then start directing them to a knowledge. And with knowledge, the truth comes. And with the truth comes, so does the liberation and the restoration of the estate. So know ye the truth, and the truth will make you free. I'm more interested in that than a title, but I'm not condemning titles.
Ava asked, how is all this going to matter if they're fixing to shut down the grids and shove people into camps?
Of course, that's their plan. Of course, that's their plan. Now, this is your plan. The time has come, apparently, that the issue of nation states are coming up every day, and borderlines of territorial jurisdiction are coming up, and they're going to be forced to address what they haven't been addressing. So meanwhile, with the King Alfred plan, the genocide and biological warfare operations is already in place, isn't it? Isn't it? But the knowledge of the people will what? Start causing the people to say, I think I ought to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and confess my own and honor my mothers and fathers so I can have right of inheritance. Oh, I think some of these things that people have been saying every year have a relationship, but not the way they thought it was when they were in these club organizations under the name of religion and dogma. It was never placed to them in the real world. Now we are all facing it. This is why I said a couple of years ago, people talk all kind of trash about their spirituality. Well, now you're going to have to prove you God. I ain't arguing with you. Do your thing. I'm about to work. And we all have shadow work to do. So let's work on our lower self, and Mother Nature will open up what you need. Because it's proving that the people won't buy or sell without that mark or license from the beast. Oh, so the beast is the number of a man, isn't it? Oh, you thought it was some Baphomet signal somewhere. No, he got 2 legs, 2 arms, and a head, and he's been doing a lot of dirty stuff to you, and you thought he was your government. Thought he was your banker. Thought he was your lawyer. They're Roman Curia members and Satanists of the Dark Order. And they've been ruling this planet. And the cleanup is on its way, because the earth is your house. Get your house in order. Repair the nation. We need healing. And I'm going to tell you bluntly, because this stuff is coming out as we speak, not just later, because you're experiencing it now. A lot of people are going to need consolation and solace systems, because a lot of people aren't going to be able to handle necessarily, they're not going to be willing to handle the ugly that they're going to be exposed to. And before it gets better, it's going to get worse. And this is my response to the sister and to the statement. I support your statement in caring and everything, but I'm also realistic that in war, there's casualties. All the people, this is not an issue, although it could be an issue of saving the world, because whosoever will, let them come. Whosoever will, let them hear. And whoever so will, let them serve Rome, and Rome is going to devour them. That's the intent. It doesn't have to happen, but only by your will. And so what are we doing? We're doing our little part of trying to help in this great missionary work of uplifting fallen humanity. And often by dealing with subject matters and information that many people over the decades have deliberately avoided. They're more interested in titles, and they're more interested in being liked by the people. And they're more interested in having their hands into people's pockets. Oh, and I'm not denying that it takes finance to do things. I know that. However, that's not where I'm coming from. So I don't need a title. That's again for those who keep thinking I need a title. I don't need a title. I'm tired of you guys with the cheap sneaks. Get over it.
So to reiterate that earlier question about whether you accepted that, but the answer was no.
Exactly. Because the deal, see, this is what must be comprehended too. And I'm saying this with all due respect and love and caring for all of our people. People have been groomed under animal husbandry to continue to do this practice of what they call the sacrificial lamb. And so the concept of human sacrifice is still with us, even though it's been hidden. And so people's dynamics of thinking in their so-called spiritual development is thinking that they need to sacrifice Jesus type thing, not recognizing that that's Rome's method of operations. And that's not Jesus's philosophy. Jesus was a target. Yeshua was a target for sacrifice. That's not his philosophy. And so they keep associating the sacrifice principle with Yeshua when it should be associated with Rome, who are bloodlusters. They come as the makers or bringers of peace when actually they're the peace breakers. They're showing it openly now because they don't have the time to keep on BSing you. They're doing it openly now. They're calling it mandate.
Mandate.
And mandate is not law. I think y'all better go in your law dictionaries and look up mandate.
Why don't you read it? What does it say in there?
Again?
What does it say in Black's Law about a mandate?
Oh, let's go with that. And you know, this is again, Dr. Naila, why they don't teach our people, you know, fundamental laws. Mm-hmm. So mandate is a command, an order, or a direction, written or oral, which court is authorized to give and a person is bound to obey. Mandate is a judicial command or precept proceeding from a court of court or judicial officer directing the proper officer to enforce a judgment, sentence, or decree. A mandate is a precept or an order issued upon the decision of an appeal or a writ of error, directing action to be taken or disposition to be made of case by inferior court. And in some of the state jurisdictions, the name mandate has been substituted for mandamus. Mandate is a substitute for mandamus. Is why you see me all over years talking about for warranto, a writ, an agreement of jurisdiction, and an agreement of mandamus. So as a formal title of that writ, etc. A bailment of property in regard to which the bailee engages to do some act without regard. So it's clearly that it is totally a judicial act from an inferior court not having a constitutional foundation whatsoever. It's a decree made by an incompetent inferior court, logically not Article 3 and logically not constitutional, i.e. mandate.
Okay, so Richard Amonrod basis, can you talk about constructing a lien against corrupted officials?
And this is where, now let's look, this is the point. So for those who comprehend those principles, look up surety bond, write that down, surety bond. The same way that you would issue a writ or a claim against any other insurance bond, etc., is in itself a lis pendens in its nature against someone who trespasses against your right or your estate. Now we're back to the word estate, aren't we? And your status, isn't it? That's called the lien. And guess what happened when a couple of them are lodged against persons who claim to have authority that don't? The insurance companies will no longer back their bond because it will kill the commissioner's office. This is why they don't teach the people that anybody in political position that claim any authority by law must carry a surety or equity bond. And what that lien is a claim against their bond. That's why you do both quo warrantos and averments of jurisdictions, and you do research on anyone that claims authority because they have an equity bond, make a claim on it. That's a lien.
Can you explain what?
And now you're going to go ahead.
Explain quo warranto.
Quo warranto is what is known as a DOAO, or the authorized legitimate delegation of authority by which an office or an officer holds office, with a time of enactment and a termination time, and is always by law variably constructed under Constitution law by no other methodology. And that's what is known as, when the question comes before any person who claims authority, are you, he or she, an Article 3 judicial constitutional officer? Just that simple. And if they don't answer it, you already know they're a fraud, and they ain't going to answer it because they're actually foreign corporate operatives. That's why they don't teach people to do quo warrantos. And this is back to even when Drew Ali said enforce the Constitution. The more you understand that, the more you will understand when you enforce the Constitution, you're enforcing treaties, which supersede that Constitution. And it's the supreme law of the land. And the judges of every state must abide thereby and must support it. And that includes the judicial officers, the executive, etc., legislative, etc. And any laws of any state to the contrary has no standing whatsoever. That's why it says notwithstanding. So read Article 3 of the Constitution for the United States. Read Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution for the United States. Read Article 6 of the Constitution for the United States. And read Act 6 of the Divine Constitutional Bylaws of the Moorish Divine and National Movement via the Moorish Holy Temple of Science and the Moorish Science Temple of America, and see that they obviously harmonize. And that's as a counter to many of the naysayers that have been infiltrated among us.
Question is, can you explain apostille number 1?
Apostille is generally still you're dealing with jurisdiction. So and this is back to my argument with many people, and many people who keep calling the de facto operatives government. They're seeking for them to give them, or what you call, not unlike say a fee simple type claim or an allodial claim. They have no capacity to exercise it because they're not the people of the land and they're not the legitimate government. The rights of sovereign divine right already belong to the people. This is where the Declaration of Nationality comes from, and this is where you organize, etc., in your judicial operations as justices, executing your right of execution of a state and reversion of a state. And of course, this is where your councils will come in. But those councils must be clear, and they're councils, not so much councils.
Here's a question from El Nucleus Bay. Should Moors be concerned about chakras and crystals?
Isn't that part of African culture? Aren't you going back to your culture on multiple levels? Isn't that your relationship to nature and nature's law? Distinguished from the artificialities that have been imposed upon the people? Just a reminder. So I'm not saying pro or con. I'm saying answer your own questions. It becomes obvious.
Okay, let me see. I thought I asked you this question. Didn't I ask you about the locked up politicians? I don't know whether you answered.
Oh, you know, we didn't go into that. That's what's taking place right now with what you now. Remember, we were talking earlier, and I think we got distracted with the multiple levels of the questions and the necessity to actually talk some of the paradigms of the operations. During the Lincoln administration, when they did what is known as the Sine Die action of covert subversion and misprision, which would include the assassination of Lincoln, which is simply a part of this construction. And they under de facto operations enforced the doctrine of discovery and the unum sanctum operations under the Circle Church and Chancery. And this is where those operatives of the Bar Association are actually running all the courts, etc. And so when you're looking at, you understand also that during the Lincoln administration, he set up a small cadre of generals, etc., within the military to protect the Constitution and treaty operations, or the legitimate operations of the United States Republic. And that operation is called Q. And I'm sure that many of you heard this word Q being thrown around in the recent years and thinking that it's a new thing. Well, that started during the Lincoln administration. That Q operation was assigned to Donald J. Trump by the part of the military that has maintained loyalty to the Republic order of legitimate business at Morocco, etc., under the United States, or States United, the Republic, distinguished from the U.S. democracy platform of the dark priesthood of the Circle Church and Chancery. And so Donald Trump was assigned to restore as a figurehead, because there's really a lot of other people behind him, the order of the Republic. And logically, by virtue of that, the treaty enforcement and everything else to the true heirs of the land comes into play. And I remind Moors of that. It's not so much the Constitution as they see on the surface, it's what that really implies. And your mind needs to go back to the issue that all treaties and agreements entered into before the adoption of that Constitution shall be binding upon the United States, etc., as well as under the Confederation. And all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. Once you start seeing that in Article 6, you start recognizing the implications. And of course, you understand why some of your so-called black civilized or civil rights leaders and none of your politicians will make emphasis on that, nor will they make emphasis what I read to you earlier from the treaty book, etc. And why constitutional principles are always presented to our people from the perspective that it doesn't apply to us, when in fact it's a key tie to the enforcement of the treaties. And it's the supreme law of the land.
But with regard to these politicians,
they're being arrested.
Yeah, that was
under
the question.
Misprision and treason. Now look at these terms and write these down.
But why are we still seeing them?
Yeah, but I'm just CGI and other things, in clones and doubles.
All right,
let's look at mandates distinguished from supreme law. Let's look at Constitution and treaty obligations enforcements. And these things you write down because we're not going to go into all these things. Let's look at the motu proprio presented by Pope Francis in 2013. Let's look at world government corporations that went bankrupt in these late years. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and you'll see that the United States is prominently listed that they're bankrupt. Look at the meeting that the Pope had with so-called religious leaders from all persuasions, etc., Islam, so-called Judaism, and Christianity, and you noticed how all of them were kissing his finger. And you want to understand the dogma situation and their promise to stop exercising the doctrine of discovery, which has still been enforced, that our people been falsely told was racism and prejudice to cover it up. And this is why people that keep on promoting the race paradigm are frauds, not because I say so, because when you know the real history, you already know they're in place to divert your attention from the reality of the doctrine of discovery and unum sanctum operations. And therefore, our people have been continuously being injured. And of course, this is back to the issue of my concern with people who have this knowledge. Get out in the field, get your hands dirty, take off them royal clothes, and start liberating your people. Like Noble Drew Ali said, with all these sheiks and sheikesses and grand sheiks, he says, the hedges and the highways, which means take it to the people. Excuse me. Go ahead, Dr. Nadia.
Well, so I need you to weigh in on this because there's a comment here. T is not a Moor, B either. So, wait a minute. Let me finish where you said T is not a Moor, B either. So I'm thinking that it is like double teaming against the Moors. Look at what's happening. And then the other follow-up is that this individual says, my reading as well, Taj confuses on this. So the fact that I'm just saying,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm putting them back both there because you know what they're saying.
I'll explain. Go ahead.
When you talk about them being being assigned, they're saying, and
right,
with good reason, that neither of them are Moors.
Legitimate statement. Go ahead.
And we've even said that. Statement. We've even said that with regard to where do we figure in
legitimate statement
to the fight that is over our estate.
Legitimate statement.
Okay, so weigh in.
And legitimate statement and legitimate critique.
Okay.
Now you got to look at what you call political chess. You make a move, Rome makes a move. All right. What is it that Trump's assigned to do? To restore the republic. This is on their part with the military, because the nations won't trade with them anymore, and they won't buy U.S. Treasury bonds anymore, which are the foundation for their economic system that made the Jesuit Order's Federal Reserve what is known as the reserve currency for the world, a status which has been lost. However, you're in flux. When I say you're in flux, because they have been controlling under feudal law your estate. This is back to you comprehending that you've been under occupation. Therefore, you have interest. You have interest because they're occupying your land. They're occupying your estate. They've stolen your gold and silver. They're operating on your land in breach of treaty, etc. By default, you have interest. However, as we said in opening, they've been doing what? Pretending to be Americans, haven't they? And they've been battling over your estate for power over your estate. Meanwhile, you're supposed to have been standing up and starting to take your places among the affairs of men, not forgetting that they're de facto, which I've always said they're de facto. I understand and comprehend exactly what I've been saying. What you're looking at is chess. And guess what? By default, some of our people have been the pawns, and I'm saying by fact, I'm telling many of you, step off the board. Observe them battling over your estate and take your places among the affairs of men.
So basically, even though they're battling over
your estate, it affects you.
So what is our position as having not taken our place in the affairs of men? What is the move now in this chess game for us? Because there's just two sides, and we're the third side.
Exactly. So now you're supposed to have been studying, haven't you? Isn't that what Drawley set up? Can't say that he didn't, because he certainly did.
Well, yeah, he did.
And then he said, come all ye Asiatics of North America, and hear the truth about your nationality and your birthrights. You're not Negro, black, colored, or Ethiopian. Come and link yourselves back with the families of nations. Now, look at Act 1 of the Divine Constitution and Bylaws. He says, the chairman and moderator put in power to make law and to enforce law if he lives according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And it is known by the members of the Moorish Temple of Science, i.e. Moorish Science Temple of America. Is that not what's written? So meanwhile, while our people are in learning stage, those occupiers are fighting over your estate, hoping that you don't wake up. But when it all boils down, when they restore the republic, guess what? They're restoring the obligations of the treaty. I suggest that you read civil orders issued to Barack H. Obama by Pope Francis.